So, I guess the time has come for me to make my first coverage on this show. And I'm starting that off with a season ranking. What's up, guys? This is Willie and welcome to another video. And I guess we made it to the point where I'm covering Dragon's 9 Realms. Yay, I guess. But for this quick video, I'm going to be doing a season ranking of every Dragon's 9 Realms seasons. And it'll be based on how much I really enjoy and invest in myself throughout the seasons and how impactful they really stuck to me, which I'll be honest, the show in general just didn't really work out that way. But let's just get into the ranking. So there's 8 seasons to rank here. So let's get right into it. So the season I'm going to rank at the bottom is the one that has really faded from my memory when I initially watched it. To be honest, I haven't rewatched much of the show after I first initially watched it, so not much of it has truly stuck with me, but this season on the bottom felt like one that could have just been skipped and you would already know what's going on, besides a few minor aspects, and that's season 3, where I just feel like this season is probably the most forgettable among all of 9 Realms, which to be honest, all of 9 Realms in general is just not the greatest spin-off, but this one's probably the worst of the worst since I can't even recall much notable moments from this season besides the part where Eugene joined the Dragon Club and maybe the time that Alex went in to adopt that fireworm. But outside of that, the rest of the season just felt pretty rudimentary, which is really on par with the show in general in terms of the dialogue and humor. And I don't see myself finding this season to be that memorable in comparison to the others, so that's why I have season 3 at the bottom. Now ranking at number 7, this one's definitely a much more later season, which I will say the later seasons do get better than the previous one, but I feel like this is the more later season that just has the biggest regression and frustrations throughout my watch for it, and that is season 6. But really, I just felt like I had a really frustrating time with this season since there was just so much loose ends to this season that I can't really justify ranking it much higher. I mean, let's get right into it. The only standout episodes for me is clearly the last 2 where we have the moment that Tom literally gives up his dragon book to Buzzsaw just for an exchange of what he thought was an anecdote only to be anything but playing into Buzzsaw's deceit. But really, that scene was just so frustrating to watch, just stemming from how Tom's naivety costing him the only important relic that meant to him, but also his friend Thunder's life being almost put to end. And it's just so hard to watch. I mean, yes, there's tension involved, but at the same time, it's also frustrating to watch how much Tom folds in this spot. And the rest of the season is pretty much dragged out filler because this is what the show is all about with its heavy-handed filler instead of putting in more gravitas to its actions. And I mean, while not great, I do like how the ending really set up the tone for season 7 with Buzzsaw being a very impeccable force that needed to be taken down. So I do like that aspect of setting something more exciting for the following season, but aside from that, this season just really dumbs down way too much, so that's why I rank it at number 7. And now for ranking number 6, where we get to seasons that I actually have no problems with, but are just mostly average to me or middling. So the season I rank here is going to be season 2, where I don't have much issues with this season, and it's probably the most memorable to me because I just stayed invested seeing if the show tried to redeem its quality with the second season, but it didn't really live up to that, which is not surprising. But at the same time, I just feel like this season just felt very stable, where yes, there was a lot more action involved which kept me thrilled, but I just think the way they were portrayed was just very rudimentary. I do like the end stretch of the season where we got a pretty interesting fight sequence at the end, but considering it was only the second season and there was more to come, it was clearly not as grand as it could have been. Besides that, the only other things that I can really note from this season is that it introduced us to June's brother Eugene, who always comes off as that cheesy older brother archetype, which whatever. But then we obviously get introduced to the spin-off's villain Buzzsaw, who only really gets this one episode introduction, which is kind of underwhelming considering how big he would be by the end of it. But aside from that, that's really much it from this season, so I'm just going to have to rank it at number 6, even though it is way stronger than the previous season I had just listed. Now we get to ranking number 5, and that is season 4, where it felt like a much more refreshing season after the slog of the season in season 3. But to me, this season felt like the one that themed around the Snow Realm because that's pretty much everything it was all about, exploring the Snow Realm. I mean, we do obviously get the foundation of Buzzsaw's villainous arc, which I mean, it was kind of underwhelming how minimal of a role he had this season, but I do think it did set his character up greatly for what kind of dominant force he was going to become. With this season, I like how it expands upon Thunder's personal life reuniting with his family, and that was really nice to see. And one thing I want to note from this show that I feel like because it's obviously a continuation of the original How to Train Your Dragons universe, they try to make parallels with Tom and his friends situations with Hiccup and his friends, but I feel like it's done in a very timid and unconventional way where there's not much gravitas to it compared to the OG, which they are managed with much more gravitas to this situation. And then speaking of that, the reason I'm not going to have this season much higher is because we have one moment that really harms it. We're in one of the last few episodes. We get the cameo of Hiccup's iconic prosthetic leg. But in introducing this iconic relic, the show decided to stupidly tarnish it when they have Tom feed it to a dragon that he was fighting with, which that alone is really ridiculous and so unacceptable from an OG fan's point of view. And this wouldn't be the last that they would do some crap like this. So because of that moment, which if you are not aware of the OG, you would not care much of it. But if you're coming into this season having been a huge fan of the original Dragons franchise, this can really harm your enjoyment from it, which is why I feel that way. So because of that, I have to knock this season down quite a bit to like the middle ranking. So there's that. Now ranking at number 4, and I'm gonna have season 5. Where I'll be honest, this season felt like the theme of just the townspeople eventually finding out dragons exist, and I do somewhat like that we're having Olivia finally getting properly introduced to the dragon's world, and the adventures on top of that were more enjoyable to watch, but at the same time, there's obviously heavy-handed dialogue that just come off so rudimentary and doesn't bring much gravitas. And I also feel like the first episode just felt completely unnecessary, where funnily, when I started watching the season, I actually started from the second episode because I was more interested and I already got the sense of what was going on without the context of the first episode, which, and to add on top of that, I don't really like this aspect of Olivia continuing to say, I have to tell them. Then just tell them! Don't just continue to say you're going to do it and then not do it. Actions are more valuable than words, and obviously, the townspeople do eventually find out, not from Olivia's mouth, but the exposure of the dragons when they needed rescuing. And then what I can say the more notable part is when we find out that Tom and Olivia are indeed descendants of their ancestors Hiccup and Astrid 1300 years ago, which I'll be honest wasn't that surprising to me, considering why would they even focus on Tom if he has no personal relevance to Hiccup's bloodline. But I think it's a nice revelation to connect the characters with the OG. But outside from that, that's pretty much what I've got to say about season 5, which is just fine. So that's why it's ranked number 4. Now for ranking number 3, which this top 3 here is the definitive best that I can really think of. But number 3 here was kind of a hot potato between 2 seasons that I had to choose from. So I eventually landed on this one, and that is season 1, which I'll be honest is way more memorable than the next season that I'm going to talk about, but I just feel like the following season had a lot more action to them since we already have gotten to know the characters and what's going to happen. While for this season, it's justified why there's not much action sequence involved is because we're getting an introduction to this main characters and their relationships with the dragons. I mean, it is an alright premise to what the show is going to be, and I do like how each episode is a continuation off of each other, so in that way there is not much loose ends to them at all. And I do like how each episode introduces us to a new character and their connection with a dragon, which just allows us to get to know them and how their dynamic is, even though, I'll be honest, there isn't really much depth to these characters at all, nor is there any sort of development going on. But still, I do think the show does an alright enough job to present the premise of what the Nine Realms is gonna be. So I'll rank it here number 3. And now to rank the top 2, which if you can't tell are the latest 2 seasons left, which goes to show how much the show does try its job to improve upon the next season. And I do like that aspect with any given TV show in general, is that there's not much regression done to them and they are actually progressing. And this show does a decent enough job with it, even though it's a complete mess. But ranking at number 2, I'm just gonna go with season 7, because obviously it's not the final season, so there isn't much of a grand resolution to it, but I do like everything else about this season, where we got a lot of redemption from this season, obviously coming back from the disaster of season 6, where we have Alex, of all people, being able to retrieve the book back, which, great on her. There's also this romantic relationship that is blooming between June and Tom that is really gleaned upon this season, and I think the finale was also pretty good as well, bringing a lot more tension to what the final showdown is going to be for the last season. But obviously there's the criticisms and nitpicks I have to make. There's obviously the dumb aspect of, oh, the Dragon Club is now disbanded because of some stupid cards. That just felt so contrived. And I do think the episode involving Eugene trying to make a new Dragon Club just involving some of the parents was just also very cheesy to watch. But besides that, I do think this season really does a great job in setting a much more improved tone to the end stretch of the series, but it still does not have that great of an impact in the grand scheme of things, especially stemming from most of its lackluster intensity and also inconsistent pacing, which I should mention that's what is one of the biggest problems with this show in general, is how rushed it comes off at, where it just harms the pacing for a majority of the episodes. Somewhere here, I'm just gonna rank this number 2. Now for number 1, I guess I'm just gonna have it be season 8. Where really, it's just because it's the resolution of the series, because pretty much all of us do not have much enjoyment with this elongated spin-off that kept on ruining the legacy of the OG. But let's get into the details of why I think season 8 is just the best in my eyes. I think it just does a great job in trying to culminate every conflict that has been set up to this point. But it doesn't change the fact that there is still some dragged out unnecessary episodes that don't hold much weight to the theme of the season in general, where we have like the episode where a founder comes and pays a visit and the people must hide the dragons, which why have that on the final season when you could have just put that somewhere in season 7 so we couldn't ruin the pacing of the show? But you know what, Nine Realms never has a good pacing, so it always has too much to be desired. And also, we have another dumb part with the whole ordeal with Valka's staff, where once again, when they introduce some relic or treasure from the OG, they decide nothing more than to disregard it and completely ruin it in this franchise by destroying it. And that's the same thing for Valka's staff here, and that's just so stupid. Don't get me wrong, as much as I express my frustrations with this aspect, I don't think it has much impact in comparison to Hiccup's prosthetic, which definitely is way more worse, but it's still bad nonetheless that they're actively tarnishing these treasures that came from the original franchise. I do really find it interesting how this season really went all in. I mean, the death of Sledkin was definitely something to really set a new standard for the end stretch of this season. And we just have too much meandering about before we get to the final showdown. Which I should also mention, I'm kind of underwhelmed with what they did with Buzzsaw's character. Really pretty much minimized his force after how much he was set up to be the final boss to be taken out, only for him to not be. And especially since we don't have much proper conclusion to his character, I'm just really disappointed that that's what happens. But I was interested in the final showdown, especially when it got more tense after the death of the Elder Nightlight would happen to pass his powers to Thunder to finish the job, and he does so. And after that's done, with so much damage being done to the world, the people must leave the town and also must say goodbye to the dragons. And I do think it was an average resolution to the series, considering it just sort of parallels to the Hidden World where the humans are separated from the dragons. So with that, that's why I would just have this rank at number 1, because I feel like it brought the most weight to the series as a whole compared to any other season. So that's that. And that's it. You know, Dragon's Nine Realms is just kind of the show that I have so much issues with its lackluster pacing and its unnecessary and rudimentary filler that greatly harms my overall enjoyment throughout the series, which also leads to the wonkiness of my ranking, which I'm not even solid with. But at the current point I'm just gonna have it like this because that's how I looked at my enjoyment with them. So that's my coverage for the Dragon's Nine Realms season ranking, and eventually, at the end of next year, which will be the 5th anniversary of this series, I am going to make a big retrospective video reviewing every episode. So keep your eyes out for that, which I'll be honest, that video will probably be necessitating a lot of rants and frustrations I'm going to express, but that's pretty much the Nine Realms in general. A very inconsistent spin-off that leads to a lot of frustrations. But anyways, I appreciate you all tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next video.